Imagine this. You walk into the meeting. The agenda was sent that morning. You've got your notes, you've got your perspective, and you're ready to contribute. The conversation starts, and something feels a little off. Decisions are landing too fast. There's no real debate or conversation going on, and certain people in the room are unusually quiet. Not because they have nothing to say. These are the ones that are the chatty Cathys, but because they've already said it somewhere else before you got there. And then your phone starts lighting up. You glance down. Someone in the room just texted you while the meeting is happening, something they clearly didn't want to be said out loud. You've just entered the triangle, and nobody told you the shape of the room before you walked in. Today, we're talking about the meeting before the meeting, that private text that's sent during the meeting, the decisions that were already made before anyone asked you for your input. Today, we are talking about triangulation. Welcome to Strong Face, the podcast for leaders caught between caring for their people and enforcing a system that wasn't built to do so without losing themselves in the process. I'm your host, Tamara Stewart, and in each episode, I take a real situation leaders face at work and show what's actually broken and what's yours to fix. Real quick before we get into it, here's the tea. And I literally mean that because I don't spill it, honey. We are going to talk about real situations, real dynamics, real pressure that leaders face every single day. But what we're not going to talk about are real names, real companies, real clients, because I never violate a confidence. I will never tell somebody's business on this microphone. Not because I don't have stories, because trust me when I tell you, I have me some stories. But because that's unprofessional. It's not who I am, and honestly, it's just not cute. What I will do, however, is tell the truth about patterns, moments, and feelings, because those belong to all of us. Okay? Now let's get into it. Here's what it's looking like. You've been here. You know exactly what this looks like when people have had whole conversations before anybody ever showed up in the meeting space. And somehow, you still feel excluded from the moment because the energy tells you that the decisions, the conversations, the unspoken things that are not being said in the meeting have already happened. Maybe it was over lunch, in someone's office, or on a call that didn't include you. Either way, by the time you all got in the room, the decision was already dressed up as a discussion. It looks like the colleague who never pushes back in the meeting but always has strong opinions right before it and right after it. You know, they're the one that's managing the outcome from the outside. They've gone to all the key players, all the influencers, and they've made sure that they've let their wishes and their thoughts and their perspectives be known. But when they're in the room, they're mighty quiet. The meeting itself is the theater, and they've already seen the script. It looks like someone's phone lighting up during a presentation. Eyes dropping for just a moment. A small smile or a slight shift in posture lets you know that the person was amused by what they just saw. An invisible conversation happening inside the visible one. And you're not in on it. Or maybe you are, and we'll get to that in a minute. And you may or may not know what's being said. It looks like finding out after the fact that a decision was made about your team, your project, or even your role. And that conversation that led to it happened between 2 or 3 people who never once thought to bring you in it directly. Not because they forgot, but because it was easier going around you to get what they wanted. And it looks like you, the leader on the outside of the triangle, finally connecting the dots. Maybe you're connecting them right in the middle of the meeting, or maybe it's that aha moment that you experienced after everything was over and you started finding out that this little piece was slipped over here and that little piece was slipped over there, and you're wondering, how was I not brought in on any of this? It's realizing that what felt like a strange meeting or an odd dynamic or a decision that seemingly came out of nowhere was actually the end result of a process that happened way before you entered the space. That is what we're talking about. Here's what you or your team may be feeling in the triangulation space. You see, when these types of things happen, you can generally feel it before you're able to put words to it and name it. It's the sense that something started out before you actually got in the space, and that people are anticipating what someone else is going to say and almost egging them on or giving them the right juxtaposition or the right segue to land the point just where they wanted it to land. Your team is looking at you and they're thinking, I wonder if they're picking up on it too. Does my leader have any power at all? Can they see what the outcome is going to be? Do they see that this is unfolding like a set of dominoes right in front of our faces? Or are they seemingly oblivious to this? They wonder if you're playing the game yourself or are you just letting the game go on as a silent spectator? Because this environment has taught them that this is how things actually get done in the organization. Something quiet but important has broken down, and it's called trust. And once your team stops trusting that the process in the room is real, you won't be able to get that back as easily as you lost it. And you, dear fearless leader, depending where you sit on this, you may be feeling a few things yourself. If you've been triangulated around, there's a particular kind of sting to it when you know that people are moving and shaking strange around you, and decisions and conversations are happening without you necessarily being included in them. And you might be frustrated or even disoriented to know that people that you thought had your back are informing decisions and outcomes around you without you. Now, if you've been the one in the pre-meeting or the one sending the text in the middle of the meeting, and I say this without judgment because we've all been there, and I know I've been guilty, especially when it comes to the phone text messages in the meeting. You get that little sly message, and it's not the good job you did, you killed that presentation, or you made an excellent point, but it's the message that is a little bit petty and chips away at the person that's speaking, or talking about how you can't believe that this person entirely missed the point, or here they go again, running off at the mouth, not knowing what they're talking about, or mansplaining, or womansplaining, because we're equal opportunity around here. Yeah, I've been guilty of it. I've read the message. I've smiled. And if it was particularly funny, I've even snickered. But even though it's not right, and even though we're all guilty, we have to come to grips with the part that we play in it all. And if you are a person that silently participates in these types of dynamics, you might be realizing that that level of input, that level of going along to get along, that level of even blowing off some steam may not be the healthiest expression of your leadership in that moment. And maybe you're just managing the tension of having way too many tabs open in your mental, in your team, in your organization at one time. And it's the way that you blew some smoke. Regardless of where you find yourself in this dynamic, whether you're on the receiving end of the triangulation, whether you're a willing participant, or maybe you got drug in it, kicking and screaming. I say that with a little bit of jest because usually these types of conversations happen in the text messages and in the DMs in the middle of the meeting with trusted friends and confidants. So they generally know that it's okay to send you a slick, petty little message in the middle of the meeting because they know you're going to respond. Or even better, they're going to watch you for your body language because they know you just that well to know what that slight smirk means, or that lift of the eyebrow, or that change in the seat. And they're going to know that when they're sending it to you, you probably will agree with them. Because how many times do we really challenge and stand up for what's right when these types of things happen? See, the reason that it happens is because it grew. It grew out of frustration. It grew out of being the path of least resistance around a hard conversation. It grew because we realized that it might be safer in the organization to say our private thoughts amongst friends in a safe text message thread space than actually out loud, because maybe the environment is not conducive for real discussion. Maybe there really isn't a tell us what you think about this and they mean it type of environment. Maybe the only way you can blow off the steam or express your frustration or even really send your friends a message and say, like, what exactly do they mean by that? Maybe that's the only safe space that you can ask the question because the actual room, the conversation that you're in, may not necessarily be the safest space for you to be the voice of dissension or the voice of questioning. These types of environments are cultivated and they continue to spread. And sometimes that's because conflict avoidance is deeply human, and other times it's because we've learned that within this particular organization, within this particular team, with these particular leaders, it's better to nod and smile and debrief about the meeting after the meeting. And maybe if it's a last minute meeting that got put on our calendars, we reach out to our friends to say, hey, do you know what this might be about? Because I just got brought into this meeting and I don't have any context for it. So we tap our network so we can kind of get a little feel about what's getting ready to happen before we walk into the space. And here's the hard part to sit with. A lot of times the system, the structure, rewards this type of behavior. The people who sit silently in meetings are the ones that are often promoted, the ones that are brought in on projects, the ones that are seen as amiable or a good company person. And generally, the people who are raising questions and saying that they don't necessarily agree or daring to challenge what's actually going on are labeled as the problems. So, environments teach us that this is sometimes the best way to communicate when we have a differing of opinion or a differing thought. So you see, there's not necessarily a single villain, although we all have been guilty of running full conversations in our text threads in the middle of meetings. And some of us may even be guilty of having the meeting before the meeting, or dare say the meeting after the meeting, which those are my personal favorite because I want to hash out. I need to process. I want to hash out what happened in there. And when they said this, did they mean what they said? And how did they get to that point? And if I think that there was some shenanigans and hijinks that were going on, I might call my friends and we might have to have a coffee. We might have to go walk and get coffee after the meeting so we can process what went on and try to connect whatever dots we think are out there to see, was there any real triangulation going on? And sometimes that debrief is a form of triangulation itself. So what can you do as a leader in this situation? Well, if you realize that you are the person that's been triangulated around, and as you rise in leadership ranks, it will happen if it hasn't happened already. Someone is going to find that schmoozing, rubbing elbows, laying groundwork, politicking is a easy way to get something across the finish line that may impact you, sometimes with or without you. They'll go to their advocates and their sponsors. They might even go to your boss. They'll go to who they think are the friendly people in the room, and they will try to get out ahead of some things so that they can kind of steer the conversation when you get in the room. And we've already talked about the fact that this stings because we would like to think of ourselves as open leaders, people who other people feel safe coming to, maybe with a differing thought and a differing opinion. And whether or not we're safe in our leadership capacity is a whole different conversation that might be a future podcast episode. We are not the only source of determining whether or not we are safe as a leader. That's something that requires and should involve other people's perspectives and opinions. So it does sting. It stings to have people working around you. And it makes you question whether or not you're someone that people need to move around. But we should address it head on when we see it happening. Because if it's left unchecked, it can erode the trust, it can erode communication, it can even erode innovation within an organization. Because if people aren't expressing their true ideas in the room for the benefit of the whole, how are you getting to the best thought and the best idea? If there's no healthy challenging going on, how do you know that what you're getting ready to move forward is actually going to land the way it's intended to land? If you're in a diverse space with different types of people who represent the people that you serve or your customer base, and voices are not being amplified and people aren't saying what they truly think, perhaps because it's not a safe space, or perhaps they've been conditioned and learned that they should not raise concerns. How do you know that the thing that you're doing is going to land the way that you intend for it to land if there's no challenging that's happening into the room? So we should name what we're observing, and we should create space for people to voice a difference of opinion. I would dare say that we should even ask, hey, how's everybody feeling about this? Is there anybody who thinks that this isn't a good idea? Speak now. Are there things that we're missing? Are there things that we should be diving into a little bit deeper? Is there a stakeholder or a group of people that are being served that maybe we haven't fully tapped into? If we think that this is the best idea, how? How do we get there? How do we know? And do we have any blind spots? These are all really important questions that we should be asking in meetings where decisions are being made. Now, this one's going to hurt a little bit, y'all. We got to keep it real with ourselves about whether or not we're a part of the problem. And you just heard my confessions. I have done it. I have sent the text message in the middle of the meeting, and I have read the text message in the middle of the meeting. I have giggled and laughed and snickered. I have been amused. I have even written notes like old school throwback style. I've even written a little note and slid it across the table in the middle of a meeting, okay? I know that I'm guilty. And I sometimes do some self-reflection as to why I felt the need to do it in that particular space. Sometimes it's cute. Sometimes it's an actual message that I need someone to know. Or maybe I'm bringing something to someone's mind that we talked about in a previous conversation, and I want them to remember to bring it up here. And sometimes, if I'm being honest, I'm just being petty in the moment because maybe it's not my favorite person that's making the point and I'm rolling my eyes. I am the queen of emojis, and I will put some eyeballs in a text message so fast. I will send a gift so fast. I am that girl. And so, just like I'm being honest, I need us all to get honest about whether or not we are a part of the problem and whether or not we are triangulating someone else. It's one thing to send some eyeballs in a meeting that's not necessarily directed at a person. It's another thing to be out here laying groundwork, throwing bricks, trying to build walls to block people in or keep people out of what we think our sacred playgrounds are. We need to be real with ourselves. And like I said, I know this one stings a little bit. It's a little rough. But we need to know whether or not we're doing it so that we can course correct before we expect other people to live up to a standard that we're not living up to ourselves. And if you are leading a team, a meeting, a room, take a beat, read the room. If you see that 4 or 5 people are picking up their phone all at one time, encourage people to be present in the moment. Actually address what you're seeing. Create safe spaces and protect the room. You can't necessarily call someone out for having a full-on conversation and a message that you don't know anything about because you don't know what the message says. But if you see the rhythm of someone put their phones down and 4 people pick their phones up and their eye glances across the table and people are moving forward or leaning back or smiling or smirking, you can invite the rest of the room to get back present in the moment so that we can stay focused on the task at hand. That is perfectly permissible as a leader. That does not accuse anyone of anything. It helps ground. You can also set meeting objectives at the start of the meeting. You can come up with team norms and expectations, particularly if it's an all day, half a day, long, extended meeting. You might need to ground with some norms and expectations before you get started. As leaders, we are entrusted to not just protect the spaces, but to protect the people that are in our care. And so for that reason, again, once we've identified whether or not we're the source of the problem and we've adjusted ourselves, we should course correct ourselves. And then we should do the things that we should do as leaders to make sure that the room is safe for others. So what do you do when your leader is the petty Betty in the situation? Well, I'm going to say this. First of all, just because a person is in a leadership capacity or leadership role does not mean that they have it all nailed down and locked down on appropriate workplace behavior. Sometimes we have what I like to call human moments where someone cut us off in traffic that day and we got into it with our significant other and the kids were yelling in the car and we're already frazzled before we ever got into the office space. So we're not the best version of ourselves. And then to have all that going on and then be responsible for leading people and upholding standards is a double whammy because at some point you are likely not going to be as successful as you want to be in that space. So give your leader some grace. If you have the opportunity, the privilege, the chance to see them in one of their more human elements. But if it is a pattern of consistent behavior where you see that your leader is undercutting people and triangulating, or even worse, bringing you into the middle of their dysfunction and their triangulation of others. I've seen it where a leader will go and talk to a subordinate about their peer and kind of play the peers against each other, thinking that they're trying to breed healthy competition. But what that really does is foster resentment and create the beginnings of a toxic, if it's not already toxic, work environment. So what do you do when it's your leader that's the problem? You got to tread this one lightly. And I am a big proponent, again, of always making sure that you understand and that you're in touch with what your core values are and what you will and will not do as a leader, like where your values sit. And for me, my values are at the compass of what I do, and I kind of use them as my North Star. They kind of guide me. So you gotta get real clear on that first. And then you have to weigh whether or not it's beneficial to even bring it up to the leader. Are they aware of their behavior? Do they realize how they're showing up? Do they know what's being said or how it's coming across, how it's landing? They may not. Just because a person's in a leadership capacity does not mean that they have a PhD in self-awareness. We all have blind spots. So if you have a relationship with your leader where there's a level of professional respect and trust, you can raise it in the form of a question and point it out to them that this is landing a particular type of way when they do these particular behaviors, and be specific, because there's nothing worse than giving a person feedback and they asking you for an example and you don't have one because you haven't thought about it. Number one, it makes you look unprepared for the feedback that you're getting. But number two, if they are the type of leader that does a lot of self-reflection and they are mindful of how they show up, they might ask for examples. It's not them being combative or them being defensive. They are literally trying to map it back to a particular time, maybe to understand the headspace they were in or what was going on. Or also, it could be because they're trying to manage optics and they need to know what the example is so they know who was impacted and who was in the room. So people have different reasons for asking this question. But if you feel like you're safe enough to be able to raise it to your superior, consider raising it in the form of a question. Are you aware that when A, B, C, D, E, F, and G happens, this is how it lands? And or other people follow your lead and it creates an environment where everybody starts picking up their phone once you pick up your phone, because they may not be aware that that's the type of impact that they're having. And then if you see that the behavior is consistently happening and becoming more than a pattern and it is toxic, then you'll have to make a decision about whether or not this is the type of leadership that you want to sit under. But again, this one is a real human topic. This is what happens in real life. We all go to meetings. We have all been to a meeting that we thought was low value add or had somebody in it that we didn't get along with or we professionally disagreed with or we just didn't flat out like, if we're being honest, because everybody is not for everybody. We might not like the person, their approach. We might think our department or our team is superior to theirs. They might have cut us off in a meeting one day and we're holding grudges. Like, all these things happen in real life workspaces. Understanding whether or not we are becoming a part of the problem by triangulating, by having conversations before the meeting, by setting dominoes up to fall in certain ways. Are we plotting and planning before we show up? These are all things that are worth consideration. And so again, before we hold other people to standards, we should look at ourselves and determine whether or not we are a part of the problem. But if we do realize that it's happening within our team, within our organization, there are ways for us to raise it as a question, to challenge appropriately, to create safe spaces for others, to create room for people to raise differing opinions in meeting spaces. Because again, if we're not okay with a little dissension, if we aren't okay with healthy challenging, how are we going to get to the best idea, to the most effective approach at the end of the day? If there's one person that's the loudest voice in the room and they're always the one doing the talking, and heaven help us if it's the leader, because people do not like to challenge the leader. But if you aren't challenging your leader and you aren't raising appropriate questions, My question to you is, what value are you adding if you're not protecting the organization from falling in ditches that you can clearly see? So this particular topic it's a little rough because this is a human thing and we're all human beings. Leadership does not preclude us from being humans. We all have bad days. We all have people that we enjoy having conversations with more than others. We all have people that we professionally disagree with. And sometimes that shows up in triangulation. It really, really stinks when you're on the receiving end of it, but we have to be honest about the part that we play in it as well. So as I close, I just want to remind us, people are people, and systems are built by people who are flawed. And a lot of times those systems were shaped by people who came before the flawed people, and those people were flawed. And because we're all human, triangulation happens. Usually it doesn't start with malice, but if it is being used in a personal manner to undercut people, to usurp authority, to cut people out of important decisions, it can cause a lot of problems within an organization. It generally starts with self-protection because we don't feel safe to articulate what we're truly thinking and feeling in front of the entire group. So we say it in our trusted group of confidants and friends that aren't going to judge us for it in the text message thread. Sometimes it's conflict avoidance. We know that if we say what we really think, we're going to start a fire we're not ready to put out. And sometimes it's us deciding that the risk of exposure in the open conversation is not worth it, so we don't say it. Well, we say it, we just say it offline. Then it keeps going because it's working for us. But you get to decide as a leader, not only what you participate in, but also what you allow, what you model, what kind of leader you're going to be when nobody's looking, when nobody's reading the text thread amongst you and your friends. Like, what's the worst that can happen if nobody knew it, right? Until it becomes public. And sometimes it does become public. So let me just drop that. There are times when what you put in the message does become public. So just a little word of warning. You don't put anything down that you wouldn't want to see in the front page of the paper or in front of everybody at the company retreat. Don't put it in writing. But in the meantime, try to put down the strong face. Show up as your real self to the meeting. Say what needs to be said in an appropriate and respectful manner. Whatever room you're in, whatever capacity you are within that room. And as our moms used to say, like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. Don't say it in the DMs. Don't say it in the text. Don't say it at all. Until next time, take care of yourself and those that you serve. Thanks for listening to Strong Face. If this episode resonated with you, or it sounds like a familiar story you've heard from a friend at happy hour, subscribe and share it with them. We can continue to unpack these things together.